It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, folks, welcome in. Have a bunch of great herd mentality items to get to. We're going to go all over the place with our topics today. Little Josh Allen, some wide receiver talk, some hypothetical scenarios, some uniform discussion. We've got a lot to get into today, so let's get started. The first one comes from Dan, and Dan says, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Bills prioritizing big pass catchers. I think this is a good question, and it's an undeniable truth. The Bills have revamped their wide receiver core, and in doing so, they got a lot bigger. Keon Coleman, 6'3", 213. Mack Hollins, 6'4", 221. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 6'4", 206. Chase Claypool, 6'4", 238. And then Curtis Samuel, who's your speed edition, 5'11", 196. It's not like he's small. Like you see some speed receivers that are 5'9", 180 pounds. Curtis Samuel, the speed guy, is 5'11", 196. Can moonlight as a running back for you. So the Bills definitely got bigger at wide receiver, and it feels intentional. So why is this the case? I have some suspicions as to why. The leading thought is that the Bills' best pass catchers are middle-of-the-field slot options. Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, James Cook. Those guys really thrive in the middle of the field and from the slot. And what helps those players is big-bodied perimeter threats, guys that can draw some attention on the outside to free up space in the middle of the field. So I think that's number one. Number two is that the Bills did need perimeter targets, right? Like we had this conversation, especially after the Bills signed Curtis Samuel, and you start to look at this Bills wide receiver core, and you're like, well, everybody's good from the slot. Who can win outside? Well, here comes a bunch of options that can win outside. And again, one of the important things to consider in what's different about playing in the slot versus playing outside is that in the slot, you get a two-way go, right? You get a two-way go with your release. On the outside, on the line of scrimmage, you can face press coverage, and you're closer to the sideline, which really restricts your ability to have that two-way go. And so you have to be able to out-physical corners a lot of times to be able to get into your route stem. So having those bigger-bodied guys, in theory, helps you do that. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be a smaller or regular-sized receiver and win outside. I mean, Stephon Diggs is clear evidence of that. But the Bills needed some guys that could win these leverage battles on the perimeter. And then lastly is blocking. Whether that's in the run game, the Bills love to use wide receivers as insert blockers in the run game, and you love to do that with bigger-bodied guys as opposed to smaller people. And then also in the quick passing game where the Bills under Joe Brady, they really ramped up their perimeter screen game. Well, you want big bodies that can block on the perimeter when you're trying to throw those quick screens out to your wide receivers. So that would be my thoughts as to why the Bills have prioritized bigger pass catchers. Next one here comes from Drew. Drew says, what's up with the Bills facing so much man defense last year? With Josh's ability to extend plays and to run, We ought to eat up man defense. Why did opponents run so much man against us? How did we do against it? And how can we be better this year? It's a great question from Drew. And yeah, the Bills faced the highest percentage of man coverage of any team in the NFL. In fact, only Sam Howell with the Washington Commanders had more dropbacks against man coverage. But again, as a percentage of snaps, Josh Allen faced the most. And you think to yourself, that's crazy, right? Man coverage means backs to the line of scrimmage. Josh Allen's going to take off and run. The Bills should be able to make teams really pay for that. Well, the reason that they couldn't make teams pay for that is because they lacked weapons in the passing game that can consistently beat man coverage. A lot of guys that can sit in zones and make themselves available, but the true man beaters weren't there. And even Stephon Diggs took a step back, kind of being able to separate against man coverage. So that's why, like, teams looked at the Bills wide receivers and said, we don't really respect your ability to play man coverage. We'll play man coverage and live with the idea that Josh Allen might be able to run on us, and we'll commit a spy and we'll figure it out. So that's the root of it. As for the results, like I said, the second most total snaps, Josh Allen's completion percentage against man coverage, 56.9%. That was 15th best in the NFL. His adjusted net yards per attempt. So that adjusted net yards per attempt is a great metric because it factors in like lost yardage for sacks. So when the Bills faced man coverage, Josh Allen had 6.73 yards per attempt, and that was 13th in the NFL. Now, the number that you did expect is that Josh Allen did have the most yards off scrambles against man coverage, and also had 4 rushing touchdowns, which is double what the second highest quarterback had. And also, I think this is very interesting, and all these numbers come courtesy of the Fantasy Points data suite. It's unbelievable the amount of data that you can get from it. But this one's very interesting, and I think this speaks to the Bills' inability to beat man coverage with their wide receivers. Josh Allen had the lowest percentage of throws to his first read against man coverage, which should be this beautiful opportunity to say, it's man coverage. This is our best matchup. I'm going there with the football. Josh Allen, the lowest percentage of throws to his first read facing man coverage. I think that is the number that really highlights the fact that the Bills just did not have man beaters. Now, hopefully, with this new looks sporting cast, Josh Allen can pick out those matchups a little quicker. They can separate, and the Bills can be more successful playing against man coverage should teams choose to play them similarly this year that they did last year. Next one here comes from Jason. Jason says, can the dip in defensive production on third down and in the red zone last year be attributed to play calling by McDermott with Frazier leaving? I know we were all tired of Frazier's defenses in the playoffs, but was he dialing up better plays in those critical times? It's a good question here from Jason. And end of last week, I did a podcast on metrics that must improve for the Buffalo Bills in 2024 to have more success. And I pointed out that the Bills were 19th in red zone defense, 19th in third down defense, and that's calculated through percentage of conversions. How often did teams convert on third down? How often did teams get into the red zone and score a touchdown? The Bills' percentages 19th in both categories. So that was kind of uncharacteristically low for the Bills under Sean McDermott. And Jason's question here as well, is it McDermott's play calling in those instances versus Leslie Frazier? I'm not sure I would say that's exactly it. I do think it's probably some of it. I think defensive injuries played a lot into this as we've been through it. Matt Milano gone after week 4.5. Daquan Jones missed most of the season. Tre'Davious White gone after week 3.5. Your safeties, Poyer and Hyde both kind of had individual moments. Benford missed some time. You had injuries, right? Oliver missed time. Rousseau's playing with a broken foot. Epinesa went down. Miller's not what you wanted him to be. The Bills had injuries on defense. And so in the high leverage downs and moments when you don't have your best players available, you're not going to be as good. So that certainly plays into it. I think tired legs in the secondary was a big deal, and that's me kind of calling out Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. You could tell they just didn't have as much spring in their step, and in some of their man coverage situations where they were tasked playing one-on-one against a tight end or a wide receiver, they couldn't run and stay in phase. Sometimes with kind of being unable to square up ball carriers in space and make a tackle. You saw that happen from time to time. But also, I mean, the Bills had to reinvent their defense on third downs, on long and late third downs, whenever Milano went down, right? You had this situation where Poyer goes to linebacker, Tyrel Dodson comes off the field, Taylor Rapp comes in and plays deep safety. Well, that's a massive switch to what you have going on, and I think that hurt them on third downs. But then also, yes, I do think Sean McDermott is culpable in this because I thought he kind of struggled to thread the needle between playing coverage and sending pressure, right? I thought that was kind of an issue for him, even on some of the longer third downs, where sometimes you just have to be able to play coverage, make a tackle, and get off the field. Sometimes he would send pressure and try to heat up the throw, and it got him in trouble. I just thought maybe there was instances that McDermott struggled to thread that needle. But again, I do have some grace for him based on the dynamics that I already outlined here. All right, bunch of good stuff to get to here in just a moment, including the next core of special teams players and regression candidates. Are there any regression candidates for the Bills this year? We'll talk about all of that on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, the next one here comes from Alex. Alex says, in the McDermott era, we have always had, let me pause. In every era of every coach in the history of football, there are a couple players on the roster that exclusively play special teams. That's not a Sean McDermott special, folks. Every team has players on their roster that are dedicated to playing special teams as their primary function. So let me get back to this. Alex says, in the McDermott era, we've always had a couple of players on the roster that exclusively play special teams with no offensive or defensive snaps like Tywan Jones or Tyler Medikevich. What players on the roster this year do you anticipate being in that bucket? It's a good question, and I do think it's worthwhile to point out that the Bills have kind of said goodbye to a couple of those key core special teams players in a Saron Neal and a Tyler Medikevich, right? Those guys were kind of the poster boys for this exact question. And so who are those core special teamers? I think Mack Hollins is going to stand out in that capacity. He'll play a little bit of offense, I'm sure of that, but his value throughout his career, even dating back to North Carolina, has really come primarily on special teams. I think he'll be a big-time asset in that capacity. I think you have to look at Reggie Gilliam as a big-time answer in this department. I mean, last year, Reggie Gilliam played 5.6 offensive snaps per game, but 21.3 special team snaps per game. I mean, Reggie Gilliam is primarily a special teams player. Cam Lewis is another one of those guys where if it gets down to it from a depth perspective, he'll have to play on defense, but he averaged 19 special team snaps per game last year. I think you look at all of your linebacker depth. So any linebacker not named Matt Milano or Terrel Bernard, those guys are going to be core special teams players in Dorian Williams, Nicholas Moreau, Balin Spector, Edifon Ulafosio, whichever other four guys make the team, they will be critical special teams players. And then I think safety 3, probably Cole Bishop. I don't know. I feel like there's not a lot of momentum for Cole Bishop to start as a rookie. I think it's going to be Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp. And if that's the case, I think Cole Bishop's primary function this season will probably be on special teams. So I think those are kind of your special teams only type players. Maybe not to the extent of a Tywan Jones or a Saron Neal or a Tyler Medikevich, but those guys I think will be the core guys on teams. Mike says every year we see players regress, whether it's due to age, injury, or simply other teams catching up to what that player is good at. Who would you say are 3 Bills players who may see a regression this upcoming season? All right, so I have some good news in answering this question. I struggled to find easy answers here. I'm not super convinced that there are many good options, which, look, should be the case because the Bills went through this youthful roster transition. So you should have a lot less candidates that fit this description. And I would assume that Von Miller has already regressed, right? So he doesn't really count. That happened last year. In fact, I think we're looking for a bit of a surge from Von Miller as he's further removed from his ACL injury. So some names that really kind of pop for me, I guess La'el Collins. I don't know if La'el Collins is a lock to make this roster, but a player that spent most of last year, he didn't play last year, right? He was kind of working back from some significant injuries. You kind of worry about what that's taken away from him in terms of movement skills, and he already wasn't much of a plus athlete to begin with. So I think La'el Collins is a guy that I think it could really catch up to him this year if it hasn't already. Dwayne Smoot's a guy that I'm monitoring. He played last season coming off of an Achilles tear, and it was definitely his least effective season after a lot of consistency in Jacksonville. And now he was available to come to Buffalo. I think he's a good player, but will we get more of the Dwayne Smoot that we saw before 2023, or is it going to be more of the 2023 version moving forward? And then I think you have to put Matt Milano into this conversation. Again, I'm not predicting it, but I have a piece of me that's a little bit concerned. He's entering his age 30 season coming off of a tibial plateau fracture. And what does that look like? I think we can all admit that we've not been very excited about the caliber of performance that we've seen from Trey White and Von Miller coming off of injuries. And, what does that look like for Matt Milano? Now, Matt Milano has come off of injuries and played well, but even like Harrison Phillips, you go back to that first season off the ACL tear, just big injuries coming back. You just don't know what you're going to get right away. And so there's a piece of me that has a level of concern for Matt Milano, but collectively, I don't see as many great candidates. Like last year, you might say Poyer, Hyde, Mitch Morse, right? Like you could kind of point to those guys and sense that they're aging and, that they could be regressing a little bit. This roster, given the kind of purge of those types of players, is in better position to not necessarily have much in the way of regression. Topher says, with all the quarterbacks getting raises on their contracts, some haven't done anything spectacular to deserve those numbers. But if Josh wins MVP and makes it to the Super Bowl, whether winning it or not, what do you think will be the number his contract could go up to? And do you think that Kansas City would give Mahomes a new one to one-up us? So it's a good question here. And I talked on the Monday podcast this week in the last segment on the Josh Allen contract situation, kind of the dynamics of the quarterback market, where Josh Allen slots and what the Bills might do. And my suspicion is that they will do something similar to what Kansas City did with Patrick Mahomes entering 2023, where they moved up some money from the back end of his deal across a 4-year stretch and then made him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And so while his average annual salary is still $45 million based on the deal, the way that the money moved around, it puts him in a position for this next 4-year stretch to have, at the time when he signed it, the most money of any quarterback. So I think the Bills could do something like that. But this is a bit of a different angle. You're saying that if the Bills kind of redo the contract, what dollar amount does it get to for Josh Allen under those circumstances? I'm not even sure that I think there's a chance this happens going into 2024. So your scenario would operate under the assumption that nothing happens going into 2024. And then Josh Allen's the NFL MVP and the Bills win the AFC. What is, if they were to wait and do something after the season, what does that look like? Well, I think you look at the top of the market where Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence are sitting at $55 million a season, and Josh tops that. I think he gets to $56 million or more. And again, go back to that Patrick Mahomes deal. When they redid that, it wound up being $53 million a season and some change. And the top of the market at that time was Justin Herbert at $52.5 million. So the market is the market. Right now, the top guys are getting 55. If Josh Allen has a significant change to his contract, he will top the current $55 million, assuming I wouldn't assume Dak Prescott, Tua, or Jordan Love goes higher than 55. I think they can be in that ballpark. But if it's going to be 55, I think that's Josh Allen gets 56 in this world. All right, folks, got more to get to on the other side of it, including a nice hypothetical scenario. I want to talk Taylor Rapp and then a question about alternate uniforms. So be sure to stick with me. All right, folks, the next one here comes from Mark. Mark says, I just listened to your Future Wave of Contracts podcast and loved looking into the future. With your current knowledge of the players and based on your contract projections, you have to keep 3 of the players and let 3 of them walk. What do you do? So end of last week, I did a podcast on contracts, and I highlighted 6 players that were on rookie deals that I think are going to be in line for sizable contract extensions with the Bills either this offseason or next. And that group of players included Khalil Shakir, James Cook, Greg Rousseau, Spencer Brown, Christian Benford, and Terrel Bernard. And here's the good news. Before I give you my answer, in reality, you don't have to look at it like this. You don't have to pick 3 to keep and pick 3 to let walk. So I think I could probably talk myself into at least 5 of these as players that, yeah, I'd figure out a way to get them back. So let's start there. I would want all of these players back for the most part. But in this scenario that Mark has given me, that's not the case. I have to pick 3 to keep, pick 3 to let walk. So let's start with the let walk. The easy one was James Cook. He's a running back. It's too easy to find running backs. It's silly to pay him, and so that's an easy choice for me. I also put Khalil Shakir in this, and that hurt me very badly. But the argument that I talked myself into, even though I don't fully agree with it, is that you're getting into the middle class of paying wide receivers. With a guy like Khalil Shakir, kind of in that potential 15, 16, 17, 18, $19 million a year range. And maybe you wonder about resource allocation and if that's the best way to spend your money. And then Spencer Brown was the other let walk guy. And I like Spencer Brown. You guys know that. I've been a champion of Spencer Brown since he was drafted. I really have kind of pounded the table for him, but I would talk myself into kind of the injury history. And tall dude that has some back problems, and it's not just been the back. He's had shoulder surgery, has had an elbow deal. I mean, it's just like that would tip the scales in favor of me saying, yeah, if I can only pick 3 to keep, have 3 to walk, I would put him in the let walk category. So that means I'm keeping Greg Rousseau, Christian Benford, Terrel Bernard. Greg Rousseau, so young, so physically gifted, so good against the run, really good pass rusher. I think the question is just how dynamic of a pass rusher he can be. I think he's a good pass rusher. Can he be a great one? I think at a minimum, you have a really, really good starter. Christian Benford, who I think is the best young corner on the team. I think he's, a dream come true in terms of schematical fit for the Bills. And then Terrel Bernard, I think he's the leader of the defense, right? He's a quarterback of the defense. He's young, a matchup player. I like the way the defense looks with him at middle linebacker. So I'd want to continue with that. So challenging question, but also one that in all reality, it doesn't have to be looked at through that lens. So keep them all except for James Cook. You guys are the James Cook thing is going to be crazy because people are going to think I don't like James Cook. I just have questions about James Cook and I have questions about paying any running back in the whole NFL. It's not good business. All right. The next one here comes from Paul. Paul says, my question is about Taylor Rapp. Do you think he was so dangerous to our own players last year and early this year because he is still learning the system? Last year when he was in, he scared the crap out of me with his late hits and friendly fire. Does he have a history of being late and hurting his own teammates? Good question, Paul. I think a lot of people think about this when they consider Taylor Rapp and the player we watched last season. I don't know that I would point to it being him not being completely comfortable in the system as a reason why. I just don't. I don't buy into that at all. I think maybe he was trying to do too much and he was aware of the opportunity. Everybody knew, right? It's kind of the end of the line for Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Are you going to be part of the long-term solution here at safety? Well, you brought in for a 1-year prove-it deal, and you have an opportunity to be a fixture here after the team that drafted you said goodbye, right? Like, as a second-round pick. So I think the opportunity, maybe trying to do too much and make a name for himself, led to some of those moments. And he's also referenced some personal struggles that he had. You never know, right? That's kind of can impact the way you play the game. And generally speaking, I'm unaware if this was a problem for him previously at Washington, where he played his college ball, or with the Rams. So hopefully that stuff stops. You feel like it'd be an easy conversation that Sean McDermott or Bobby Babich or Joe Dana or whoever would have with the guy and say, look, I mean, you got to be a pro. We love your aggressive style, but you got to be a pro. You can't be hurting your own players. Like, got to be smart, right? It seems like an obvious thing to deal with. So deal with it, make that go away. But yeah, this is definitely a thing with Taylor Rapp based on our season of exposure to him in Buffalo. But I don't think it's because not knowing the system. I think it's probably more of the other stuff that I highlighted. Last one today comes from Pierre. Pierre says, what are your thoughts on my proposed new alternate jerseys? Instead of being the all red that the Bills wear once a year, how about a buffalo wing orange colored jersey and tights with a blue cheese colored helmet? The red just bores me, and I think this would stand out. Do you have any suggestions on alternate uniforms? Not what you said, Pierre. No, I'm not into that at all. I like very clean uniforms that have elements that pop. And this is just, you're not speaking my language at all. And look, it's all subjective. So what I like, you might not like. What you like, I might not like. It's okay. But if you're asking my personal opinion, yeah, I'm not into this idea at all. That's no. Yeah, no thanks. What I would like to see, I'm a fan of the 90s uniforms and that being used as an alternate. I'd love to see the red helmets with, what we saw Bruce Smith and Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed and Jim Kelly playing. I'd love to see, Josh Allen in that uniform. That would be awesome. I also miss the Bills not using the standing Buffalo throwbacks. I thought those were awesome, especially the all whites. Remember the year the Bills got Terrell Owens, they also debuted the all-white iteration of the throwbacks, the standing Buffalo throwbacks. I thought those were awesome. So bring those back as well. I'd love to see the Bills, like, obviously their current uniform kit is near perfect, right? I love their current uniform kit. Very minor changes I would make. I've commented on this in the past, but I don't like how the helmet stripe on the back widens at the bottom. I would just have that the same width the whole way through. And then I would also change the outline of the numbers and the stripes. It has this like darker color on the outside. I would just completely get rid of that. Those are the two changes I would make to the Bills uniforms. And from there, they would be perfect as is. So I would want to wear them like almost every game. But I would love to see one game a year in the all reds, one game a year in the 90s throwbacks, and one game per year in the standing Buffalo throwbacks. And then maybe you alternate on a yearly basis, like home versus away when it comes to your throwbacks, whether it's 90s or standing Buffalo. I think that's what I would try to work in. So I like the idea of uniform variety, but can't be having buffalo wing orange colored jerseys and tights with a blue cheese colored helmet. I mean, good creativity, but that's not going to align with my preferences of football uniforms. All right, folks, thanks for being here. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.